Nobody dared speak aloud. Through the thick blizzard, the SEAL team pressed flat against frozen earth. Rounds cracked overhead, splitting wind. The radio crackled nothing but static. The point operator wouldn't answer anymore. A whisper cut through the headset. "Captain's gone." No crying, no panic, just the killing silence of soldiers who knew they'd been left behind. Then, through the whiteout, a shadow emerged. Rifles slung across shoulders, and the legend returned. The rescue mission had failed 3 hours before the storm hit. Lieutenant Marcus Shaw crouched behind a boulder the size of a pickup truck, ice crystals stinging his exposed skin. The wind howled at 60 knots. Visibility, 10 feet on a good second, 0 the rest. 8 SEALs, pinned between 2 ridgelines. Enemy fighters controlled the high ground on both sides. This wasn't the plan. The plan had been simple. Extract the downed pilot before enemy reinforcements arrived. Get in, get out, 30 minutes max. But the Weather Bureau had missed the storm system rolling over the mountains, and now they were locked in a granite coffin with armed guards on every wall. Contact left! Petty Officer First Class Devin Pierce fired 3 controlled bursts uphill. Muzzle flash briefly lit the swirling snow. Shaw pressed his throat mic. "Captain Reyes, we need to pull back to the secondary extraction point." Static. He tried again. "Captain, do you copy?" More static. Then a fragment of sound. Could have been wind, could have been breathing. Captain Elena Reyes had taken point position 40 meters ahead, working her way up a deer trail toward the enemy sniper nest. Standard Reyes playbook. Eliminate the biggest threat first. Worry about everything else second. Shaw had served under her for 2 years. He'd watched her put rounds through targets at distances that shouldn't be possible. He'd seen her make decisions in seconds that other officers needed hours to consider. She was the first woman to command a SEAL platoon in direct combat operations, and she'd earned that position through skill that made gender irrelevant. But even legends couldn't fight physics. Even Reyes couldn't see through a blizzard. "Martinez, you got eyes on the captain?" Shaw called to the operator closest to Reyes's last position. "Negative, LT. Lost visual when the snow got heavy. The explosion came from uphill. Not a gunshot. Bigger. A grenade or satchel charge." The sound rolled down through the storm like distant thunder. Then silence. Shaw's chest tightened. "Captain Reyes, report." Nothing. "Anyone have comms with the captain?" 7 negative responses rippled through the squad channel. "Martinez, move up and verify her position." "Already on it, LT." Shaw counted 30 seconds. 45. A minute. Martinez's voice came back, pitched higher than normal. "LT, I'm at her last known. There's blood on the rocks. Equipment scattered. Looks like the ledge gave way. I can't see down through the snow, but there's a drop here. Maybe 60, 70 feet." Shaw closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them. "Captain Reyes, if you can hear me, click your mic twice." The radio offered nothing but wind. Pierce appeared at Shaw's shoulder, breathing hard. "Sir? Hold position. I need to think." But there wasn't time to think. Rounds started snapping overhead again, closer this time. The enemy was maneuvering down from both ridges, trying to flank them. Petty Officer Second Class Tyler Grant crawled up beside them, his left arm wrapped in hasty bandages, blood seeping through. "They're pushing from the north side, maybe 20 hostiles. We can't stay here." Shaw's mind raced through options, all of them bad. They could try to recover Reyes, but that meant sending operators down a cliff face in whiteout conditions while under fire. High probability of losing more people. They could hold position and wait for air support, but the storm had grounded every aircraft within 200 miles. Nobody was flying in this. They could retreat to the emergency extraction point, but that was 8 kilometers through enemy territory, and they'd have to leave Reyes behind. Every option ended with someone dead. "LT, we need orders." Pierce's voice was steady, but his eyes said what his mouth wouldn't. "Make the call." Shaw pressed his mic again, trying one more time. "Captain Reyes, this is Shaw. If you're receiving, we are preparing to move to E-Prep Alpha. Acknowledge if able." Static. He waited 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. Shaw's throat was dry. He'd been in combat for 8 years, survived firefights in 4 countries, led teams through situations that shouldn't have been survivable. But he'd never had to do this. "Martinez, pull back to our position. Everyone else, prepare to move, we're going to E-Prep Alpha. Specialist Chris Warren, the youngest on the team at 23, looked up from his position. What about the captain? Shaw met his eyes. The captain's gone, Warren. We stay here, we're all gone. Warren started to protest, but Sergeant First Class Nathan Cole put a hand on his shoulder. Follow your orders, Specialist. The words settled over them like the snow. The captain's gone. Shaw had said it, made it real, turned possibility into fact. For 2 years, Captain Elena Reyes had been the tip of the spear, the operator who went first into the worst situations, the sniper who took impossible shots, the officer who brought everyone home. And now, she was a statistic, a name that would be carved into a memorial wall. 5-meter intervals, Shaw ordered, his voice flat. Martinez, you're on point. Pierce, rear security. We move on, my mark. The team began shifting into formation. Mechanical, professional. This was what training did. It let you function when everything inside was screaming. But Shaw saw it in their faces, heard it in the way they moved, the hesitation, the doubt. They'd lost their captain, and in a place like this, losing your leader was the same as losing your map, your compass, and half your ammunition all at once. Warren keyed his mic, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Reyes never lost anyone, not once. Cole's response was sharp. Stay focused, Warren. But I said, stay focused. Shaw checked his weapon, checked his gear. Everything by the book. Everything professional. He didn't look at the cliff where Reyes had fallen. Couldn't. Because if he did, he'd have to face the truth that even legends bleed. The team moved through the blizzard like ghosts, 5 meters between each operator. Weapons up, eyes scanning through snow that fell so thick it felt like drowning in frozen static. Shaw led them east along a ridge that offered minimal cover but was their only route to the emergency extraction point. 8 kilometers. In this weather, that meant 3 hours minimum, if they didn't freeze first, if they didn't walk into an ambush, if they survived at all. Contact rear, Pierce's voice cracked through the radio. Everyone dropped. Shaw pivoted, bringing his rifle to bear. 3 enemy fighters materialized from the snow, AK-47 seconds barking. Pierce returned fire, dropping 2. The third went to ground. Keep moving, Shaw ordered. Don't let them pin us down. They pushed forward, boots crunching through 8 inches of new snow on top of ice. Warren slipped, caught himself. Martinez pulled him upright without breaking stride. The cold was becoming a factor. Shaw's fingers were going numb even inside his gloves. His face felt like somebody had taken a blowtorch to it, then frozen the burns. Grant was getting worse. The kid hadn't said anything, but Shaw could see him favoring his left side, moving slower than he should. Grant, status? Good to go, LT. He wasn't. Shaw knew it. Grant knew it. But what was the alternative? Stop in the middle of a combat zone to check bandages? They pushed on. The terrain forced them down into a narrow ravine, walls rising on both sides. Tactically awful, but the only path forward. Shaw didn't like it. Every instinct said this was a kill box waiting to happen. Double time through here, he ordered. Don't bunch up. They were halfway through when the shooting started. Muzzle flashes lit up both ridges. Rounds sparked off rocks, kicked up snow. The enemy had predicted their route, set up a perfect ambush. Find cover. Shaw dove behind a fallen tree, returned fire already pouring from his rifle. Warren took a round in his plate carrier, the impact spinning him around. He went down hard. Warren's hit. Cole sprinted forward, dragged the specialist behind a boulder. I'm okay, Warren gasped. Plate caught it. But his hands were shaking. Bad. Shaw assessed the situation in seconds. They were in a natural funnel. Enemy on high ground, both sides. No air support, no artillery, no way to flank. This was how units got wiped out. Martinez was returning fire uphill. Controlled bursts. LT, we can't stay here. Working on it. Shaw scanned for options. The ravine continued another 100 meters ahead before opening into a broader valley. If they could reach that, Grant cried out. Shaw turned. The petty officer was down, clutching his leg. Fresh blood darkened the snow. Medic. Cole was already moving, but they didn't have a dedicated medic. Everyone had basic combat lifesaver training, but this was beyond basic. Pierce dragged Grant behind cover, started working on the wound. Femoral arteries intact, but he's losing blood fast. Shaw's mind raced. They couldn't advance, couldn't retreat, couldn't stay. And all he could think was, Reyes would know what to do. Reyes had an ability to see 3 steps ahead in combat. She'd read terrain, read the enemy, make decisions that seemed insane until they worked. Shaw had watched her pull teams out of worse situations than this. But Reyes was gone. And he was just a lieutenant who'd been promoted 3 months ago, leading a team that was about to die in a frozen ravine because he didn't have answers. LT. Martinez's voice cut through his spiral. We need a call. Shaw forced himself to focus. Training. Follow the training. Suppressing fire on both ridges. Warren, Cole, left side. Martinez, Pierce, right side. I'm getting Grant mobile. The team responded instantly, rifles hammering. Shaw low-crawled to Grant. How bad? Pierce didn't sugarcoat it. Bad. He needs surgery within the hour or he's done. Can he move? Not on his own. Shaw cursed internally. Externally, he stayed calm. We're going to bound forward. Pierce, you and Martinez provide cover. Cole and Warren, you're with me carrying Grant. We move on 3. LT. We're not going to make it carrying. We're not leaving him. Everybody moves together or nobody moves. Clear? Nods all around. Shaw counted down. 3, 2, 1, move. They exploded forward, Pierce and Martinez laying down suppressing fire, while Shaw, Cole and Warren half-carried, half-dragged Grant through the snow. 50 meters. 75. Rounds snapped past Shaw's head. Something tugged at his sleeve. He didn't look. 100 meters. They reached the end of the ravine, spilled out into slightly more open terrain. Still taking fire, but the angles were worse for the enemy now. Shaw's lungs burned. His arms screamed from Grant's weight. They found a cluster of boulders, set up a hasty defensive position. Warren was hyperventilating, his breath coming in short gasps. The kid was 19 years old, and this was his first real combat deployment. He'd trained for situations like this, but training and reality were different countries. Warren, look at me. Shaw gripped his shoulder. Breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're doing fine. The captain, if the captain was here. The captain isn't here. But we are, and we're getting out of this. Shaw didn't know if he believed that, but Warren needed to believe it. Cole finished rebandaging Grant's leg. Bleeding slowed, but he's going into shock. We need that evac, LT. Shaw pulled out his radio, tried the emergency frequency. Any station this net, this is Anvil 6. We are 8 clicks northwest of primary objective, taking effective fire, 1 urgent surgical, requesting immediate extract. How copy? Static. He tried again. More static. The storm was blocking everything. They were alone. Martinez appeared at Shaw's side, breathing hard. Sir, we counted at least 30 hostiles. They're organized, well-equipped. This isn't some random militia. Somebody knew we were coming. Shaw processed that. A compromised mission meant their extract point might be compromised too, but they didn't have alternatives. We pushed to EPREP Alpha. It's still our best option. And if it's an ambush, then we fight through it. Pierce joined them. LT, with Grant wounded, we're moving at half speed. In this weather, with hostiles on our tail, we're not making 8 clicks before dark. And after dark in this storm? He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. After dark, in a blizzard at this altitude, with sub-zero wind chill and no shelter, hypothermia would kill them faster than bullets. Shaw looked at his team, 7 operators, 1 badly wounded, all exhausted, all cold, all looking to him for answers he didn't have. For the first time in his career, Lieutenant Marcus Shaw understood the weight that Captain Elena Reyes had carried every single day. The weight of being responsible for lives. The weight of making decisions where every option meant someone might die. The weight of being the person who had to stand up when everyone else wanted to lie down. Shaw took a breath. Made a decision. We're going to make it to EPREP Alpha. All of us. Grant, you're going to get surgery. Warren, you're going to see your family again. Pierce, Cole, Martinez, all of you are going home. That's not hope. That's the plan. And we're going to execute it like the professionals we are. Questions? Silence. Then Cole spoke, his voice steady. "No questions, sir. Let's move." They gathered their gear, checked their weapons, and as they prepared to move out into the storm, Shaw couldn't help but glance back toward the cliff where Reyes had fallen. Somewhere under all that snow, the captain who never lost anyone had finally run out of miracles. Or so they thought. Number Part 3. The Legend of Elena Reyes. 2 years earlier, the briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command had been standing room only. Word had spread that Captain Elena Reyes was receiving the Navy Cross, and every SEAL who could make it had shown up. Lieutenant Marcus Shaw had watched from the back as Admiral David Henderson pinned the medal to her uniform. For extraordinary heroism in combat against an armed enemy, the Admiral read, Captain Reyes led her team through 48 hours of sustained combat, eliminated 17 enemy combatants, and successfully extracted 3 downed pilots from hostile territory. Despite being wounded twice, she maintained command of her unit and ensured 0 friendly casualties. The room had erupted in applause. Shaw had been impressed. Then he'd heard the rest of the story. The unofficial version. The one that didn't make it into citations. Reyes had taken a round through her left shoulder within the first hour of the operation. Hadn't told anyone, just field dressed it herself and kept moving. 6 hours later, shrapnel from an RPG had torn through her right calf. She'd used a tourniquet and kept walking. By the end of the operation, she'd lost enough blood that she'd collapsed on the extraction helicopter. Medics later said another 15 minutes and she would have bled out. When asked why she hadn't reported her injuries, Reyes had simply said, "Mission wasn't complete." That was Elena Reyes. Mission first, always. Shaw had met her 3 months later, when he'd been assigned to her platoon. His first impression, she was smaller than he'd expected, 5'6", maybe 130 soaking wet, quiet, didn't waste words. His second impression, formed during their first training operation, she was the most dangerous person he'd ever met. Not in an aggressive way. Reyes didn't need to posture or intimidate, her competence did the talking. Shaw had watched her make a shot at 1,847 meters in 30-knot crosswinds. The instructor had said it was impossible. Reyes had made the adjustments in her head, no calculator, and put the round exactly where she'd called it. How? Shaw had asked later. Reyes had looked at him with those cold gray eyes. Math and practice, Lieutenant, same as everything else. But it wasn't the same. Shaw knew a dozen snipers who could do the math. What made Reyes different was something else. It was the way she could read a battlefield like other people read books. The way she knew where the enemy would move before they moved. The way she made decisions in microseconds that saved lives. Sergeant Nathan Cole, who'd served under Reyes longer than anyone, had explained it to Shaw over beers one night. "The captain doesn't think like us," Cole had said. "Most operators, we see what's in front of us. We react to situations. The captain, she's already 3 moves ahead. She sees patterns we don't see. By the time we realize there's a problem, she's already solved it." "Nobody's that good," Shaw had replied. Cole had smiled. "Elena Reyes is." They'd called her Ghost in her early years. She could disappear into terrain that shouldn't hide a person. She'd infiltrate positions that were supposed to be impossible to reach. She'd take shots from angles that made enemy forces think they were fighting ghosts. But the nickname that stuck was simpler, Captain. Just Captain, no first name, no call sign. When people in Naval Special Warfare said the Captain, everyone knew who they meant. Shaw had learned to trust her completely. In 18 months, under her command, their platoon had executed 23 combat operations across 4 countries, 0 friendly casualties. Mission success rate, 100%. Reyes had a rule she'd told Shaw on his first day. "I bring everyone home, no exceptions." She'd kept that promise, every single time. Even when it seemed impossible. Especially when it seemed impossible. Shaw remembered an operation in Syria. Intelligence failure had put them in the middle of 50 enemy combatants. They'd been pinned down in a bombed-out building. Ammunition running low. No extraction available. Reyes had climbed to the roof alone, set up her rifle, and started working. Methodical, precise. 1 shot, 1 kill. Over and over. She'd held that rooftop for 4 hours, eliminating threats, while the rest of the team prepared their breakout. By the time they fought their way clear, Reyes had fired 63 rounds, 63 confirmed kills. When they'd finally reached the extraction point, Reyes had been the last one on the helicopter. As always, later, after the mission debrief, Shaw had asked her, "Were you scared?" Reyes had considered the question for a long moment. "Fear is useful, Lieutenant. It keeps you alert. I was scared the entire time, but scared doesn't mean unable." That was the thing about Captain Elena Reyes. She felt everything everyone else felt: fear, doubt, exhaustion. She just never let it control her decisions. Sergeant Pierce had once described her as made of ice and iron. Shaw thought that was only half right. The ice was real, that cold exterior, the emotional distance she maintained from the team. But underneath, there was something burning. A determination. A refusal to accept failure. Whatever it was, it made her extraordinary. It also made her alone. Shaw had noticed that Reyes never socialized with the team, never joined them for drinks, never shared personal stories. She was their captain, and she kept that boundary absolute. Specialist Warren had asked her once, during a long helicopter ride, why she'd become a SEAL. Reyes had looked out the window at the landscape passing below. For a moment, Shaw thought she wouldn't answer. Then she'd said, "Because someone has to go first, and I decided it should be me." That was all. No elaboration, no backstory. But it told Shaw everything he needed to know about who Elena Reyes was. She was the person who walked into danger so others didn't have to. The person who took the impossible shot because someone had to take it. The person who carried the weight so her team could move lighter. She was a legend. Literally. Stories about Captain Reyes circulated through every SEAL team. The impossible shots, the last-minute saves. The operations that should have failed but didn't because she was there. New operators would ask if the stories were true. Veterans would just smile and say, "Wait until you work with her, then you'll understand." But there was one story that never got told publicly. One piece of history that Shaw had only learned about by accident when he'd seen a notation in Reyes's personnel file. Before joining Naval Special Warfare, Elena Reyes had been a competitive shooter, Olympic trials. She'd been favored to medal. 3 weeks before the Olympics, her younger brother, a Marine infantry officer, had been killed in Afghanistan. Reyes had withdrawn from the trials, enlisted in the Navy the next day, and never looked back. When Shaw had asked her about it, months later, she'd simply said, "My brother believed in protecting people, so do I. The Olympics weren't protecting anyone." Cold, logical, absolute. That was Elena Reyes. And that was why, crouched in a blizzard with enemy forces closing in, Shaw couldn't accept that she was gone. Because legends don't die in random explosions. They don't fall off cliffs in snowstorms. They don't quit. But the evidence said otherwise. The blood on the rocks, the shattered ledge, the 70-foot drop into darkness. Captain Elena Reyes had gone first into the storm. And this time, she hadn't come back. Shaw forced himself to stop thinking about it. They had to survive the next 3 hours before he could worry about anything else. He checked his weapon, checked Grant's condition, checked the line of march. Behind him, Specialist Warren whispered to Martinez. "The captain always said, 'If I disappear, don't look for me.'" Martinez's response was quiet. "Yeah, she did say that. What do you think she meant?" "I think she meant exactly what she said." Shaw didn't turn around. But he filed that conversation away. Because if there was even a 1% chance that Elena Reyes was still alive out there, then they had to. No. Shaw stopped himself. That kind of thinking was how you got more people killed. Hope without evidence was just fantasy. The captain was gone. They had to accept that and focus on keeping the rest of the team alive. That's what Reyes would have wanted. That's what any good leader would have wanted. Shaw took a breath, raised his hand, and signaled the team to move. Behind them, the storm raged on. Ahead of them, 8 kilometers of frozen hell. And somewhere below the cliff, in the snow and darkness, Captain Elena Reyes lay silent. Or not. Number Part 4. SEALs pushed to the edge. The enemy was learning their pattern. Shaw noticed it during the third contact in 2 hours. The enemy fighters were no longer just reacting, they were anticipating, setting up ambushes along the most likely routes, forcing the team into kill zones. Whoever was commanding the opposing force knew SEAL tactics. That was bad. Contact front. Martinez dropped behind a snow-covered log as automatic fire ripped through the space where his head had been a second earlier. The team scattered, finding whatever cover existed. Warren and Cole dragged Grant between two boulders. Pierce and Martinez returned fire. Shaw assessed. Enemy squad, maybe 10 fighters, positioned on high ground with interlocking fields of fire. They'd known exactly where the SEALs would emerge from the tree line. Martinez, can you flank left? Negative. LT, sheer cliff on that side. Pierce, right side? I can try, but it's open ground. I'd be exposed for 30 meters. A trap, perfect terrain for the enemy, no good options for the SEALs. And Grant was getting worse. The petty officer's face had gone gray. His breathing was shallow. They were losing him. Shaw's radio crackled. For a second he thought it was incoming traffic, but it was just interference from the storm. They were still alone, still cut off. Ammunition check, Shaw ordered. The responses came back grim. Everyone down to 2 or 3 magazines. Pierce was on his last one. LT, we can't sustain this, Cole said quietly. He was right. Every engagement burned through ammunition they couldn't replace. Eventually they'd be throwing rocks. Shaw made a decision he hated. We're going to break contact. Smoke grenades on my mark. We move fast and hard toward that ridge at our 8 o'clock. Martinez, you and Pierce provide covering fire until we're clear, then follow. Clear? Clear. Shaw pulled a smoke grenade. 3, 2, 1, mark. 3 grenades arced through the air, detonating and spewing thick smoke that the wind immediately started shredding. It would give them maybe 30 seconds. Move. Cole and Warren grabbed Grant. Shaw led them east, legs pumping through knee-deep snow. Martinez and Pierce laid down, suppressing fire, rounds cracking through the smoke. 20 meters. 30. Something whistled past Shaw's ear. Too close. 40 meters. Almost to the ridge. Warren went down. Not hit, just exhausted. The kid's legs gave out, and he collapsed, Grant falling with him. Shaw reversed direction. Grabbed Warren by his harness. Get up, now! Warren tried. His legs wouldn't cooperate. Cole was already there, pulling Grant up. Shaw hauled Warren to his feet, half-carried him the last 10 meters to the ridge. They tumbled over the edge, down a slope, came to rest in a jumble of bodies and equipment at the bottom. Martinez and Pierce came sliding down seconds later. For a moment, nobody moved. They just lay there, gasping, the snow falling on their faces. Shaw forced himself to sit up. Casualties? Everyone checked themselves, checked each other. Warren twisted his ankle, Cole reported. Grant's still critical. Everyone else is functional. Functional? That was generous. They were running on fumes. Shaw checked his watch. They'd been moving for 90 minutes and covered maybe 3 kilometers. 5 more to go. Grant wouldn't survive 5 more kilometers. Hell, Shaw wasn't sure any of them would. He pulled out his map, tried to orient himself. The storm made navigation nearly impossible, but he thought they were close to a valley that might offer. Sir. Martinez was staring uphill, through the snow. Shaw followed his gaze. Dark shapes moving on the ridge above them. A lot of dark shapes. They're hurting us, Pierce said quietly, pushing us somewhere. He was right. Every contact had forced them in a specific direction. This wasn't random. The enemy was driving them towards something. Ideas? Shaw looked at his team. Silence. They were out of ideas, out of ammunition, out of time. Warren spoke up, his voice shaking. What would the captain do? Cole snapped. The captain's not here, Warren. Focus on. No, seriously. What would she do right now? Shaw started to shut down the conversation, then stopped. Maybe the kid had a point. What would Reyes do? She'd look for the pattern. She'd figure out what the enemy wanted and use it against them. Shaw studied the terrain, studied their route, studied the direction they were being pushed. And he saw it. They're driving us toward the original extraction point, he said slowly. The primary LZ. They know we'd eventually try to reach it, so they're funneling us there. Into an ambush, Martinez finished. Into an ambush, Shaw confirmed. Pierce checked his rifle. So we don't go to the primary LZ. We don't have a choice. It's the only cleared zone big enough for a helicopter. E-Prep Alpha is 8 clicks through enemy territory with Grant critical. We won't make it. So we're damned either way. Shaw looked at Grant, unconscious now, looked at Warren, barely able to walk, looked at the rest of his team, exhausted and running on empty. Reyes would find the third option, the one nobody else saw. But Shaw wasn't Reyes. He was just a lieutenant who was about to lead his team into a trap because there was no other choice. "We go to the primary LZ," he said. "But we go knowing it's an ambush. We use that." "How?" Cole asked. Shaw was making this up as he went. "They expect us to approach cautious, expecting a trap, so we do the opposite. We hit them first, fast and violent. Before they're set." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we don't have the ammo for a sustained firefight. We don't need sustained. We need 30 seconds of overwhelming violence. Get to the LZ, pop smoke, get the bird in, get out, speed over stealth." It was a terrible plan. High risk of casualties. But all their options were terrible. Cole considered it. "It's insane." "You have a better idea?" "No, sir. But the captain would've." "The captain's gone." Shaw's voice came out harder than he intended. "She's gone, and we're here, and this is the play we have. Everyone got that?" Nods all around. Reluctant, but nods. Shaw checked his watch. 2 hours of daylight left. After that, they were operating in darkness at -20 degrees. Hypothermia was as much a threat as bullets. "We rest for 5 minutes. Hydrate, check your weapons. Then we move." The team spread out slightly, each operator dealing with their situation in their own way. Shaw moved to where Grant lay, still unconscious. The petty officer's pulse was thready. His skin was cold and clammy. They were going to lose him, probably in the next hour, maybe sooner. Shaw had trained for this. He knew the statistics, knew the realities of combat medicine, but knowing and experiencing were different things. He'd never lost anyone under his command. Neither had Reyes. Until today. Warren appeared beside him, limping on his twisted ankle. "Sir, I just want to say, I'm sorry I slowed us down." "You didn't slow us down, Warren. You're doing fine." "The captain would haven't." "Stop." Shaw looked at him. "Elena Reyes was an exceptional officer, one of the best I've ever seen, but she's not here. I am. And I need you focused on surviving the next 2 hours, not comparing me to someone who set an impossible standard. Understood?" Warren swallowed. Nodded. Shaw softened his tone. "You're a good operator, Warren. You're going to get through this. We all are. Just stay with me." "Yes, sir." 5 minutes passed too quickly. Shaw gathered the team. "Primary LZ is 3 kilometers north-northwest. We move fast, maintain intervals, minimize contact if possible. When we hit the LZ perimeter, we go loud. Everyone dumps everything they've got into the tree line. We pop smoke. We call for extract." "Questions?" Pierce raised a hand. "What if the bird can't get in through the storm?" "Then we hold the LZ until it can." "And if we can't hold it?" Shaw met his eyes. "We will hold it. Because that's the only option we have." The team checked their gear one last time. Shaw helped Cole get Grant onto Warren's back in a fireman's carry. The specialist was struggling, but he'd do it. He had to. They moved out. The storm had intensified. Wind was gusting past 50 knots now, driving snow horizontally. Visibility was down to maybe 5 feet. In some ways, that helped. The enemy couldn't see them either. In other ways, it made everything worse. They could walk right into an ambush and never see it coming. Shaw navigated by compass and dead reckoning, hoping his calculations were correct. In this whiteout, a few degrees of error could mean missing the LZ entirely. 30 minutes into the movement, Martinez spotted tracks in the snow, fresh, heading the same direction they were. The enemy was ahead of them. Shaw made a decision. "We're going to shadow them, stay 50 meters back, let them lead us to the LZ." It was risky, but it solved the navigation problem. They followed the tracks through the storm, ghosts trailing ghosts. The wind howled, the cold cut through every layer. Shaw had lost feeling in his toes, his face was numb. Grant's breathing was barely audible. Warren was staggering under his weight. Just a little further, the tracks led them down into a valley. Through the snow, Shaw could make out shapes, buildings maybe, or just rocks. Then he recognized the terrain. The primary LZ. They'd made it. He raised a fist. The team stopped. Shaw scanned what he could see through the storm. Dark shapes in the trees. Maybe 20. Maybe more. The ambush was set. Shaw checked his watch. They had maybe 90 minutes of daylight left. After that, everything got exponentially worse. He gathered the team close, spoke quietly. On my signal, we charged the LZ. Full automatic, suppressive fire into the trees. Pierce, you pop smoke the second we're in the clear. I'll call for extract. Warren, you and Cole get Grant to the center and set up a defensive position. Martinez, you're with me. We hold whatever comes. Clear? Everyone nodded. Shaw took a breath. This was it. Do or die. Literally. He thought about Reyes. About what she would say right now. Probably something simple and direct. Something like, mission first, execute. Shaw raised his hand. 3 fingers. 2, 1. Go. They burst from cover. Rifles blazing. And hell came with them. Number part 5. The other side of the storm. 70 feet below the ridge, Captain Elena Reyes lay in darkness. The explosion had thrown her backward off the ledge. She'd fallen through space, hit a snow-covered slope, tumbled down through rocks and ice, and finally slammed into a boulder that stopped her descent. For several seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world was white noise and pain. Then training kicked in. Assessment. Starting with the critical questions. Am I alive? Yes. Can I move? Testing. Fingers, toes, arms, legs, everything responded. That was good. Am I injured? Definitely. Left ribs screaming, right shoulder dislocated, warm wetness on the side of her head, concussion likely, but mobile. Reyes forced herself to sit up. The movement sent waves of pain through her chest. Broken ribs. At least 3. She touched her head. Her fingers came away red. Scalp wound. They bled heavily, but weren't usually serious. The shoulder was the immediate problem. Dislocated. Useless until she relocated it. Reyes braced herself against the boulder, positioned her arm, and with one smooth motion popped the joint back into place. The pain was extraordinary. White-hot. Electric. She didn't make a sound. Training. Control. Discipline. After a moment, the pain receded to merely terrible. Reyes rotated the shoulder experimentally. Full range of motion. Good enough. She checked her equipment. Rifle was still slung across her back. Miraculously intact. Sidearm secure. Radio. She pulled the radio from her harness. The casing was cracked. She pressed the transmit button. Static. Then nothing. Dead. Reyes considered her situation. She was at least 60 feet below her team. Injured. In the middle of a blizzard. No communications. Enemy forces somewhere above. Most people would have panicked. Elena Reyes began planning. First, inventory. She checked her ammunition. 4 magazines for the rifle, 2 for the sidearm, medical kit intact, 3 grenades, minimal supplies, but enough. Second, assess the tactical situation. The enemy had somehow known about the ledge. They'd rigged it to collapse. That meant they had intelligence on SEAL tactics, possibly their specific route, which meant her team was walking into more traps. Third, decide on a course of action. She could try to climb back up and rejoin the team, difficult with her injuries, and she'd lost track of which direction they'd moved. The blizzard made navigation nearly impossible. She could try to reach the emergency extraction point on her own. But that was 8 kilometers through enemy territory, injured, in a storm. Or she could do what she did best. Hunt. Reyes pulled out her map, studied it. If the enemy was setting ambushes for her team, they'd be focused on the most likely routes. The team would be heading for either E-Prep Alpha or returning to the primary LZ. Given their situation, Grant wounded, low ammunition, weather deteriorating, they'd opt for the primary LZ, closer, more defensible, which meant the enemy would set their main ambush there. Reyes checked her compass, oriented herself. The primary LZ was roughly 3 kilometers north-northeast from her current position. 3 kilometers through a blizzard with broken ribs and a concussion. She'd done worse. Reyes stood up. Pain radiated from her chest. She ignored it. Pain was just information. It told you that you were damaged. It didn't tell you that you had to stop. She pulled out her medical kit, found the combat gauze, packed her head wound. Then she wrapped her chest tight, stabilizing the broken ribs as best she could. Not perfect. but functional. Functional was all she needed. Reyes checked her rifle. Scope was intact. Action was smooth. She loaded a round into the chamber. Then she started moving. The terrain was brutal. Steep slopes, hidden crevasses, ice under the snow. Every step was calculated. One wrong move and she'd fall again, and this time she might not get up. But Elena Reyes had spent 20 years learning how to move through impossible terrain. In mountains, in jungles, in urban combat zones. A blizzard was just another environment. She navigated by compass and terrain association. The storm made everything look the same, but Reyes had memorized the topographic map during the mission briefing. She knew every ridge, every valley. She moved like a ghost through the white. Silent, efficient, conserving energy. After 40 minutes, she heard gunfire ahead. Distant, muffled by the storm. Her team, engaged. Reyes altered her course slightly, moving toward the sound. The gunfire intensified. Multiple weapons. A firefight. She pushed harder, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Through the snow, she saw shapes. Enemy fighters, moving in formation toward the sound of battle. Reinforcements heading to join the ambush. Reyes counted. 12 fighters, moving in 2 teams of 6. She could engage, take them from behind. But that would alert everyone in the area to her presence. Or she could let them pass and continue toward her team. Reyes made the calculation in seconds. Her team was outnumbered, low on ammunition, wounded. These 12 fighters would tip the balance. Decision made. She found a position behind a fallen tree, settled in, slowed her breathing. The enemy fighters moved past, 50 meters away. They weren't expecting threats from behind. Reyes acquired the last man in the formation through her scope, adjusted for wind, for distance, for the falling snow, and fired. The suppressed rifle made a soft cough. The enemy fighter dropped. Reyes worked the bolt, acquired the next target, fired again. Another down. The enemy started to react, but they didn't know where the shots were coming from. They scattered, looking for cover. Reyes kept shooting. Methodical, precise. 1 shot, 1 kill. Within 30 seconds, 6 of the 12 were down. The remaining 6 figured out the general direction and started returning fire. Rounds snapped through the air above Reyes's position. She shifted left, found new cover, acquired a new target, fired. 7 down. The enemy was panicking now. They couldn't see her through the storm, couldn't coordinate. Reyes moved again, flanking right. Came up behind a boulder. 3 more shots. 3 more targets down. 10 total. 2 remaining. The last 2 broke and ran, disappearing into the storm. Reyes considered pursuing them, decided against it. Her team was the priority. She reloaded, checked her ammunition. Down to 3 magazines. She'd have to be more conservative. Moving again. North-northeast, toward the sound of heavier gunfire. Her ribs screamed with every breath. The pain in her head was building, concussion getting worse. Reyes pushed it aside. Pain could wait. The mission couldn't. She'd been moving for maybe 2 hours total when she saw it, the primary LZ, and her team, pinned down in the center, taking fire from 3 sides. Reyes assessed the situation in seconds. Maybe 30 enemy fighters in the trees. Her team was trying to hold, but they were clearly low on ammunition, conserving shots. Grant was down. Warren was moving slowly, favoring one leg. The team was on the edge of collapse, and Lieutenant Shaw was trying to hold it together, doing his best to command a situation that was rapidly becoming unwinnable. Good kid, Reyes thought. But he was thinking like a lieutenant, thinking about survival, about getting his people out. Not thinking like a predator. Reyes studied the enemy positions. They were focused on the LZ. None of them were watching their 6. Mistake. She moved into position, found a slight rise that gave her a good angle on the northern tree line, and went to work. First target, the enemy commander. Older, giving orders, positioned behind a large pine. Reyes adjusted for wind and distance, fired. The commander dropped. Chaos rippled through the enemy forces. Without leadership, their coordination started to fracture. Reyes shifted aim. Squad leader on the eastern side, fired, down. Western side, another leader, fired, down. The enemy was looking around now, trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. Reyes kept shooting. Slow, measured, each shot counted. Down in the LZ, she saw Shaw's head turn. He'd recognized something. The pattern. The rhythm. She knew he'd figured it out when she saw him grab Martinez, point toward her approximate position. Martinez looked. Then he raised his fist. Signal received. Reyes kept working, methodically eliminating threats, creating gaps in the enemy's perimeter. She was down to her last magazine when she saw Shaw make his move. He'd read the battlefield perfectly, saw the opening she'd created on the western side, grabbed his team and pushed through it. Good. He was learning. The enemy tried to adjust, but they were rattled now. Taking fire from an invisible sniper was psychologically devastating. Reyes covered Shaw's movement, dropped 2 fighters who tried to flank them, put a round through an RPG gunner before he could fire. Her team made it to the tree line. They were moving toward her position now, though they probably didn't know exactly where she was. Reyes waited until they were close, then stood up from her hide. The movement sent a spike of pain through her ribs. She grimaced but didn't falter. Through the snow, she saw Shaw freeze. Saw the recognition on his face. Martinez raised his rifle, then lowered it. Pierce just stared. Reyes walked toward them, rifle across her chest, moving like she'd just come back from a training exercise, not a 70-foot fall and a 3-kilometer trek through a blizzard. She reached the team. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then, Shaw found his voice. "Captain." Reyes nodded once. "Lieutenant." "We thought." "I know what you thought." Her voice was calm, controlled. "Grant's status?" "Critical. Maybe 30 minutes. Then we don't have time to discuss my survival. We need to move." She looked at the team, saw Warren's wide eyes, saw Cole's barely suppressed grin, saw Pierce shaking his head in disbelief. "The primary LZ is compromised," Reyes continued. "Enemy has it zeroed. We need to move to E-Prep Charlie." "Charlie 6 clicks, Captain. Grant won't." "I know a faster route. 3 clicks through the valley. We'll make it." Shaw studied her face. "You're injured." "Functional, Captain." "I'm functional, Lieutenant, and we're wasting time." Shaw held her gaze for another second, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Reyes looked at her team, who thought she was dead, who'd been ready to fight their way out without her. "Good work, staying alive," she said simply. "Let's finish the job." And without another word, she turned and started walking. Behind her, she heard Martinez whisper to Warren, "Told you, legends don't die." Reyes didn't smile, but something in her chest, maybe pride, maybe just satisfaction, told her that she'd made the right call. Coming back. Always coming back. Because that was the promise, the one she'd made the day she took command. Bring everyone home. No exceptions. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. The team just stared at Captain Elena Reyes, standing in the snow with blood on her face and death in her eyes, like she'd just walked out of a myth. Which, essentially, she had. Shaw was the first to break the spell. "Martinez, take point. Pierce, rear security. We're moving in 3 minutes. Warren, Cole, how's Grant?" "Still alive," Cole reported. "Barely." Reyes moved to Grant's position, knelt beside him. Her movements were careful, controlled. Shaw noticed she was favoring her left side. "Femoral artery intact?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Bleeding?" "Slow seepage through the bandage." Reyes checked Grant's pulse, his pupils. "He's in shock. We need to keep him warm." She pulled out a thermal blanket from her pack, wrapped it around Grant. Then she looked at Warren. "Can you carry him another 3 kilometers?" Warren straightened despite his exhaustion. "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Reyes stood, turned to Shaw. "Lieutenant, terrain map." Shaw pulled out the laminated map. Reyes studied it for 10 seconds, then pointed to a route Shaw hadn't considered. "This valley cuts through the high ground. It's exposed, but the enemy won't expect it. They'll be watching the ridges." "Exposed means we're vulnerable if they spot us," Shaw noted. "True, but look at the wind direction. Storm is blowing west to east. In the valley, we'll have the wind at our backs. Faster movement, better visibility for us. Worse for anyone trying to track us." Shaw studied the route. She was right. It was counterintuitive, which meant it was probably the last thing the enemy would expect. "We'll be in the open for 2 kilometers, he said. "Yes. If they have air assets, Nothing's flying in this storm, Lieutenant, not even drones. Shaw looked at her, really looked. Her left eye was swelling. Blood had dried on the side of her face. She was breathing shallow, protecting damaged ribs. Captain, you need medical attention. I need to get this team to extraction. Medical attention is third priority. Ma'am, time is first priority. Grant's survival is second. My injuries are third. Now are we going to debate this or are we going to move? Shaw knew that tone. Arguing with Elena Reyes when she used that tone was like arguing with physics. We move. He turned to the team. Pack up. We leave in 2 minutes. The team moved with renewed energy. Having Reyes back had done something to them, put steel back in their spines. Specialist Warren approached Reyes while she was checking her rifle. Captain, I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're alive. Reyes glanced at him. I'm glad you stayed focused, Specialist. That ankle going to hold? Yes, ma'am. Good. Because if you fall behind, I can't carry you and provide overwatch. Warren smiled. I won't fall behind, ma'am. See that you don't. But Shaw saw it, the slight softening around Reyes's eyes. The tiny acknowledgement that Warren's relief mattered. Reyes gathered the team. Listen up. We're moving through the valley, fast and light. If we make contact, we don't stop to fight. We suppress and move. The only objective is reaching E-Prep Charlie. Questions? Pierce raised a hand. Ma'am, what happened after the explosion? I fell. I survived. I came back. That's all that's relevant. But how did you? Petty Officer Pierce, do you understand your assignment for this movement? Pierce straightened. Yes, ma'am. Rear security. Then focus on that. Message received. Reyes wasn't interested in explaining herself. They moved out in formation. Martinez on point, Reyes behind him, Shaw with the main body, Pierce in the rear. The valley was exactly as Reyes had described, exposed but fast. The wind howled behind them, pushing them forward. Reyes set a brutal pace. Even injured, she moved like a machine. Shaw had to work to keep up. After 40 minutes, they'd covered nearly 2 kilometers. No contact, no sign of pursuit. Grant was still alive. Warren was holding up. The team was functioning. Shaw found himself alongside Reyes during a brief pause to check navigation. Captain, can I ask you something? Make it quick. When you fell, did you consider the possibility that you wouldn't make it back? Reyes studied the horizon. No. No? The possibility wasn't relevant. I was alive. My team needed me. Therefore, I came back. Simple mathematics. With broken ribs, a concussion, and no radio. Your point, Lieutenant? Shaw shook his head. No point, ma'am. Just impressed. Reyes's expression didn't change. Being impressed is a waste of energy. Being competent is useful. Focus on competence. She moved forward before Shaw could respond. Cole appeared at Shaw's shoulder. The captain's something else, huh? Yeah, something else. They pushed on. The storm was actually helping now, the wind at their backs adding speed to their movement. An hour into the march, Martinez raised his fist. Everyone froze. Movement ahead, he reported quietly. Can't tell if it's enemy. Reyes moved to the front, pulled out binoculars, scanned the terrain despite the limited visibility. 4 fighters. Watching the valley entrance, they're waiting for us. Can we bypass? Shaw asked. No. They're positioned to cover the only route in. We go around, we add 2 hours. Grant doesn't have 2 hours. So we go through them. Yes. Reyes lowered the binoculars. Martinez, Pierce, you're with me. We eliminate the security element. The rest of you hold here. If this goes bad, Shaw takes command and finds an alternate route. Shaw started to protest, but Reyes was already moving. She signaled Martinez and Pierce to follow. The 3 of them disappeared into the snow like ghosts. Shaw counted seconds. 90, 100. Then he heard it 4 suppressed shots in rapid succession. Silence. 3 minutes later, Reyes emerged from the snow. Path is clear. Move. The team advanced through the valley entrance. Shaw saw the 4 bodies as they passed, each one a perfect headshot. Warren stared at them. Shaw put a hand on his shoulder. Keep moving, Specialist. They pushed through into the valley proper. E-Prep Charlie was 1 kilometer ahead. Almost there. Grant's breathing had gone shallow. His skin was gray. 30 minutes, Cole said quietly, maybe less. Reyes heard. She increased the pace. The valley opened into a small clearing. In the center, marked by a single dead tree, was the emergency extraction point. Pierce, pop smoke, Reyes ordered. Shaw, call it in. Shaw pulled out the emergency satellite radio, punched in the frequency. Any station this net, Anvil 6, we are at E-Prep Charlie with one urgent surgical. Request immediate extract. How copy? Static. More static. Then, a voice. Broken but readable. Anvil 6, this is Eagle 2. We copy urgent surgical. Inbound to your position. ETA 20 minutes. Be advised, weather is marginal. We get one pass. You need to be ready. Roger, Eagle 2. We'll be ready. Anvil 6 out. Shaw looked at Reyes. 20 minutes. She nodded. Form defensive perimeter. Prepare for enemy contact. They'll hear the helicopter. The team spread out, creating a circle around the LZ. Warren and Cole set Grant in the center, continued working to keep him stable. Reyes positioned herself at the northern edge, rifle ready. Shaw took the south. And they waited. 15 minutes. The wind howled. The snow fell. Grant's pulse was barely palpable. 18 minutes. Shaw heard at distant rotors, fighting through the storm. Bird inbound, he called. Then Martinez's voice, sharp. Contact. Multiple hostiles approaching from the west. Enemy fighters emerged from the tree line. At least 20. Engage. Reyes's rifle barked. An enemy fighter dropped. The team opened fire. The enemy scattered, took cover, started returning fire. Rounds cracked through the air. Snow kicked up in fountains. How long until the birds hear? Cole shouted. Shaw checked his watch. 2 minutes. We can't hold for 2 minutes. We don't have a choice. Reyes was working methodically, picking off targets. But there were too many. They were going to get overrun. Shaw saw it happening, saw the enemy closing in. This was it. This was where they'd make their stand. He raised his rifle, started firing. Then the helicopter appeared through the storm, a Black Hawk descending like an angel of mercy. Birds here, Pierce shouted. The door gunner opened up, minigun ripping through the enemy positions. Get Grant on board, Reyes ordered. Warren and Cole grabbed the stretcher, ran for the helicopter. The team collapsed inward, firing and moving, fighting toward extraction. Shaw was the second to last man moving. He turned to cover the rear. And saw Reyes, still in position, still firing, holding the line. Captain, let's go. She fired 3 more shots, then turned and ran. They reached the helicopter together. Hands grabbed them, pulled them aboard. The Black Hawk lifted, rounds pinging off the armored hull. Shaw collapsed against the bulkhead, breathing hard. Across from him, Reyes sat perfectly still, rifle across her lap, looking out at the battlefield below like she was memorizing it. The crew chief moved to Grant, started advanced medical care. He going to make it? Shaw shouted over the rotor noise. Maybe. It's close. Shaw looked at Reyes. Blood still on her face. Ribs definitely broken, probably concussed. She met his eyes. Everyone accounted for? She asked. Shaw counted heads. Yes, ma'am. Everyone made it. Reyes nodded once. Then she closed her eyes. For the first time in 20 hours, Captain Elena Reyes allowed herself to stop. Behind them, the storm raged on. Ahead, a hospital, safety, home. And beside Shaw, breathing shallow but breathing, the legend who'd walked out of death because her team needed her. He'd seen a lot in his military career, but he'd never seen anything like Elena Reyes. And he hoped he never had to see her do something like that again. Though knowing her, he probably would. The Black Hawk carved through the storm, rotors screaming. Shaw leaned back against the cold metal bulkhead, adrenaline starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Across from him, Reyes sat with her eyes closed, but Shaw could tell she wasn't sleeping. Her breathing was too controlled, too measured. The crew chief finished stabilizing Grant, gave Shaw a thumbs up. The petty officer would make it, barely, but he'd make it. Warren was staring at Reyes like she was a supernatural being. Martinez and Pierce were doing equipment checks, trying to look professional despite their obvious relief. Cole caught Shaw's eye, nodded toward Reyes, raised an eyebrow. Shaw shrugged. What was there to say? Reyes had survived a 70-foot fall, trekked 3 kilometers through a blizzard with broken ribs, eliminated at least 16 enemy combatants solo, and extracted her entire team without losing anyone. Just another day for Captain Elena Reyes. The helicopter banked hard, dodging a wind shear. Everyone grabbed for handholds. Except Reyes. She swayed with the motion, perfectly balanced, eyes still closed. ETA to base. 10 minutes, the pilot called back. Shaw allowed himself to relax slightly. 10 minutes, they'd made it. Then the radio crackled. Eagle 2, this is Overwatch. Be advised, we're tracking additional enemy movement near your AO. Recommend direct route to base, maximum speed. Roger. Overwatch. Eagle 2 is... The pilot never finished the sentence. The explosion rocked the helicopter. Not a direct hit, proximity detonation from a shoulder-fired missile. Alarms shrieked. The Black Hawk lurched sideways. We're hit, the co-pilot shouted. Losing hydraulics. Shaw felt the helicopter drop. His stomach went into his throat. Can you keep us flying? The pilot demanded. Trying. But we're losing altitude fast. Through the open door, Shaw saw the ground rising to meet them. They were going down. Reyes's eyes snapped open. Brace for impact, the pilot ordered. The crew chief grabbed Shaw, pushed him into a crash position. Shaw saw Cole do the same for Warren. Reyes grabbed the overhead strap with one hand, her rifle with the other. The Black Hawk hit hard. Not a crash, a controlled landing, but violent. The skids caught on something, a rock, a log, and the helicopter tipped, rolling onto its side. Shaw slammed against the bulkhead. His head cracked against metal. Stars exploded across his vision. The rotors were still spinning, chewing into the ground, throwing debris everywhere. Then the engines cut. Sudden silence, except for alarms and the wind. Shaw pushed himself up. His head was ringing. Blood on his forehead. Sound off. Reyes's voice, sharp and clear. Shaw, functional. Martinez, good. Pierce, good. Cole, twisted knee but mobile. Warren's unconscious. Reyes moved to Warren, checked his pulse, his pupils, concussed. He'll come around, get him ready to move. The pilot's voice came from the cockpit. We've got wounded up here. Co-pilot's not responding. Reyes climbed forward, assessed. The co-pilot had taken a piece of debris through the shoulder. Unconscious, losing blood. How long until another bird can reach us? She asked the pilot. In this storm? Hour minimum. Maybe longer. Reyes pulled out her radio, tried to call base. Static. The crash had damaged their communications. We're on our own, she said flatly. She turned to the crew chief. Can you stabilize the co-pilot? I can try. Do it. Everyone else, grab essential gear. We're abandoning the aircraft. Captain, Grant can't be moved, Cole protested. Grant stays on the bird with the crew. We provide security until rescue arrives. Shaw understood immediately. The helicopter was a beacon. Enemy forces would converge on it. Someone had to hold the perimeter. He started pulling gear, ammunition, medical supplies, everything they could carry. The team moved with practiced efficiency despite their injuries and exhaustion. Reyes was checking the terrain through the broken window when she suddenly went still. Contact. Multiple hostiles approaching from the north. Time to perimeter, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Not enough time to fortify. Barely enough time to set up basic defenses. Shaw, take Martinez and Pierce. Set up firing positions north side. Cole, you're with me on the south approach. They'll try to flank us. The team moved. Shaw found a depression 30 meters from the crashed helicopter, positioned himself with Martinez and Pierce in a triangle formation. Through the snow, he saw them coming. 20, maybe 30 fighters. They knew the helicopter was disabled. They were moving in for the kill. Shaw's radio crackled Reyes's voice. Hold fire until they're at 50 meters. Make every shot count. We're low on ammunition. Shaw checked his magazine. 15 rounds. His last one. Martinez had 20 rounds. Pierce had 12. Against 30 hostiles. The math was bad. The enemy advanced. Confident. They had numbers, firepower, and position. 50 meters. Fire. Reyes's voice was ice cold. Shaw's rifle cracked. An enemy fighter dropped. Martinez and Pierce opened up. More targets fell. The enemy scattered, took cover, started returning fire. Rounds snapped overhead. Something hit the ground inches from Shaw's position. He fired again. Again. Conserving ammunition, picking targets. His magazine ran dry. He was reaching for his sidearm when Reyes's voice cut through. Northwest Ridge, more contacts. Shaw looked. Another group of enemy fighters, 10 additional hostiles, moving to flank. They were surrounded, and they were out of options. Shaw made a decision. Martinez, Pierce, fall back to the helicopter, we make our stand there. Negative. Reyes's voice was sharp. We hold these positions. Falling back gives them the initiative. Captain, we're outnumbered 5-1 and almost out of ammunition. Then we make it count. Shaw heard something in her voice. Not desperation, not even determination. Calculation. Reyes was planning something. Trust me, Lieutenant. Hold your position for 60 seconds. Shaw didn't understand, but he'd learned to trust Reyes especially when he didn't understand her thinking. Copy that. 60 seconds. He drew his sidearm, started firing. Slower now. Each shot deliberate. The enemy was closing. 40 meters. 30. Shaw had 3 rounds left in his pistol. 20 meters. 2 rounds. 15 meters. 1 round. This was it. This was where it ended. Then, Shaw heard something. Distant. Growing louder. Engines. Not helicopters. Something else. The enemy heard it too. They hesitated, looking around. An F-16 screamed overhead, breaking through the cloud cover at impossible speed. Shaw's radio crackled. Anvil 6, this is Falcon 1. We're painting targets with GPS. Recommend you get very small very fast. Reyes's voice, perfectly calm. All Anvil elements, take cover. Danger close. Shaw dove behind a boulder, pressed himself flat. The F-16 made its attack run. Precision munitions hit the enemy positions with devastating accuracy. The ground shook. The air turned to fire and concussive force. When the smoke cleared, the enemy positions were gone, just craters and debris. Shaw stood up slowly, ears ringing. The F-16 circled overhead, then climbed back into the storm. Reyes's voice on the radio, all elements, report. Shaw, functional. Martinez, ears ringing but good. Pierce, same. Cole, we're good. Silence settled over the battlefield. Shaw walked back to the helicopter. Reyes was standing outside, looking at the destruction. How did you... Emergency beacon, Reyes said simply. Activated it when we crashed. Air Force was monitoring. They couldn't extract us, but they could provide close air support. You knew they were coming. I knew it was possible. 60 seconds was my estimate of when they'd arrive. She paused. I could have been wrong. But you weren't. No. Shaw shook his head. Captain, do you ever just run out of plans? Reyes looked at him. When I run out of plans, Lieutenant, you'll be the first to know, because it will mean we're all dead. She said it matter-of-factly. No drama, just truth. Rescue bird inbound. The pilot called from the cockpit. ETA, 15 minutes. For real this time. Reyes nodded. Perimeter security until extraction. Standard rotation. The team spread out, establishing defensive positions. Shaw found himself next to Reyes again. Captain, can I ask you something? You're going to ask anyway. When you fell off that cliff, were you scared? Reyes considered the question for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. For approximately 2 seconds during the fall. Then training took over, and fear became irrelevant. Just like that, fear is useful until it interferes with function. Then it's a liability. I don't allow liabilities. Shaw studied her face. The blood, the swelling, the exhaustion she refused to acknowledge. You know you're not actually invincible, right? Of course. I'm very aware of my limitations. Could have fooled me. That's the point, Lieutenant. The enemy should never see your limitations. Neither should your team. Confidence is contagious, so is doubt. So you fake it. I don't fake anything. I simply refuse to let my limitations define my capabilities. The rescue helicopter appeared through the clouds, a beautiful sight. Within 10 minutes, they were loading aboard. Grant first, still unconscious but stable. then the wounded co-pilot, then the rest of the team. Reyes was the last one on, as always. The helicopter lifted. This time, no missiles. No enemy fire, just the storm and the sound of rotors. Shaw watched the battlefield disappear below. 48 hours ago, this had been a simple rescue mission. Now, 2 helicopters were down. 1 team member was critical, and they'd fought through more combat than most SEALs saw in a year. But everyone was alive. Somehow, impossibly, everyone was alive. And Shaw knew exactly why. He looked at Reyes, sitting across from him, eyes closed again, finally allowing herself to rest. Captain Elena Reyes, the legend who walked out of death, the officer who refused to lose anyone, the operator who turned impossible situations into survival stories. Warren had called it earlier, legends don't die. Shaw was starting to believe it. Bagram Medical Center. 0300 hours. Shaw sat in the hallway outside the operating room, still in his combat gear, still covered in blood and dirt and the residue of battle. Waiting. The doctors had taken Grant into surgery 2 hours ago. The prognosis had been carefully neutral. We'll do everything we can. Military speak for this could go either way. Martinez and Pierce were down the hall in an examination room, getting checked for injuries. Cole was in radiology for his knee. Warren had woken up an hour earlier, confused and concussed, but alive. Everyone accounted for. Except Reyes. The medical staff had tried to take her to triage immediately. Standard protocol for obvious injuries. She'd refused. Check my team first. I can wait. The doctor had protested. Reyes had simply stared at him until he'd moved on to Warren. Shaw had watched her sit in a chair by herself, back straight, despite the broken ribs, eyes forward, waiting. Always waiting to be last. After the medical staff had cleared everyone else, they'd finally convinced Reyes to let them examine her. She was in examination room 3 now. Shaw could hear the conversation through the partially open door. Captain, you have 3 fractured ribs, a grade 2 concussion, a deep scalp laceration, and what appears to be a dislocated shoulder that was recently relocated. How long have you been functioning with these injuries? 8 hours, give or take. 8 hours? Captain, you should have been immobilized immediately. You could have punctured a lung with those ribs. The concussion could have, but I didn't. And it didn't. What's the treatment? A sigh. Wrap the ribs. Stitches for the laceration. Observation for the concussion. And mandatory rest for at least 72 hours. 48. Captain. Doctor, I need to debrief with command, check on my team, and write after-action reports. 48 hours is generous. You're in no condition to. I'm in the condition I'm in. Either treat me so I can function better, or I'll function as I am. Your choice. Silence. Then the doctor's resigned voice. You SEAL operators are all the same. No, doctor, we're each different, but we're all stubborn. There's a difference. Shaw almost smiled. Even injured and exhausted, Reyes was immovable. The examination room door opened. Reyes emerged, her head wrapped in clean bandages, her ribs bound tight under her uniform. She walked with careful control, each step measured. She saw Shaw, raised an eyebrow. You should be resting, Lieutenant. Waiting to hear about Grant, ma'am. Reyes nodded, sat down next to him. Slowly, carefully. For a minute, neither of them spoke. Then Shaw said, "Thank you." For what? For coming back. For not staying dead. Reyes looked at him. That wasn't an option. It was for most people. I'm not most people. Yeah, I'm starting to understand that. The operating room door opened. A surgeon emerged, pulling off his mask. Shaw stood. Reyes stood beside him. Petty Officer Grant is stable, the surgeon said. The surgery went well. He lost a significant amount of blood, but we were able to repair the damage. He'll need extensive recovery, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Shaw felt something in his chest unclench. Thank you, doctor. The surgeon nodded, headed down the hallway. Reyes stood perfectly still for a moment. Then Shaw saw the tiniest relaxation in her shoulders, the smallest exhale of relief. She'd been carrying that weight the entire time. Grant's life, the possibility of losing him, and only now, hearing he'd survive, Did she allow herself to acknowledge it? The team performed well, Reyes said quietly. They had a good commander. They had adequate command. There's room for improvement. Shaw looked at her. Captain, you fell off a cliff, survived, walked 3 kilometers through a blizzard with broken ribs, eliminated 16 enemy combatants, extracted the team, survived a helicopter crash, and held off 30 more hostiles until air support arrived. If that's adequate, I'd hate to see what you consider excellent. Reyes met his eyes. Excellent would have been not falling off the cliff in the first place. The ledge was rigged. I should have anticipated that. Nobody could have anticipated. I could have, should have. The enemy demonstrated sophisticated knowledge of our tactics. That suggested intelligence preparation. I failed to extend that assumption to physical terrain modification. Shaw opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. This was how Reyes operated. No excuses, no self-congratulation, just brutal self-assessment and identification of areas for improvement. It's what made her exceptional, and what made her lonely. You're too hard on yourself, Captain. I'm appropriately rigorous, Lieutenant. There's a difference. Down the hallway, Warren appeared, supported by a nurse. His head was bandaged, but he was walking. He saw Reyes and immediately straightened, tried to look more mobile than he was. Reyes walked over to him. Specialist. Captain, I just wanted to say, your performance was acceptable given the circumstances. Work on your cold weather conditioning. You started to fade in the final kilometers. Warren blinked. Yes, ma'am, but you didn't quit. That matters. She paused. Good work, Warren. Warren's face lit up like he'd just received a medal. Reyes moved on to check on the others, leaving Warren grinning despite his concussion. Shaw shook his head. She'd just criticized the kid and complimented him in the same breath, and Warren was treating it like the best moment of his career. That was the Reyes effect. Her approval meant something because it was earned, never given freely. Over the next hour, the team gathered in the hallway. Cole on crutches, Martinez with his arm in a sling from a wound Shaw hadn't even known he'd taken, Pierce looking exhausted but intact. Everyone alive, everyone recovering. Reyes stood slightly apart, watching them with her usual distant assessment. Shaw approached her. The team wants to thank you, ma'am. They already did, by surviving. I think they'd like to express it more directly. Not necessary. Captain. Reyes turned to him. Lieutenant Shaw, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but there's a reason I maintain distance from the team. Familiarity breeds comfort. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency gets people killed. With respect, ma'am, I don't think letting them say thank you is going to make them complacent. Reyes was quiet for a moment. You're probably right. But I've maintained these boundaries for 20 years, and they've kept everyone alive. I'm not changing what works. Shaw studied her. Is that really why you keep your distance? Or is it because if you get too close, it hurts more when something goes wrong? Reyes' expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement. Both can be true, Lieutenant. They can be. But one is tactical, the other is human. I'm a SEAL operator first, human second. No, ma'am, you're both, and being human doesn't make you less effective, it makes you real. Reyes looked at her team, gathered down the hallway, laughing despite their injuries, relieved to be alive. They need a commander who makes decisions without emotional compromise, she said quietly. They need a commander who cares whether they live or die. You proved today that you're that commander. Reyes didn't respond for a long time. Then she walked over to the team. Everyone went quiet. I'm required to inform you, Reyes said formally, that your performance during this operation will be documented and forwarded to Naval Special Warfare Command. Individual commendations will be submitted where appropriate. She paused. Personally, I want to acknowledge that each of you maintained discipline under extreme circumstances. You adapted to changing conditions, you supported each other, and you followed orders even when those orders required you to trust that I would return. She met each operator's eyes in turn. That trust is not misplaced. I will always come back. That's not a promise, it's a guarantee. You are my team, and I do not leave my team behind. The hallway was silent. Then Cole spoke up. We know, Captain. That's why we follow you. Martinez nodded. Anywhere, anytime. Pierce added, even if you are a little crazy for hiking 3 clicks with broken ribs. Reyes almost smiled. Almost. Crazy would be doing it without purpose. I had purpose. Warren raised his hand slightly. Captain, can I ask something? Go ahead, Specialist. When you were down there, after you fell, what made you decide to come back instead of trying to reach extraction on your own? Reyes considered the question. Mathematics, Specialist. 8 operators with declining ammunition and increasing enemy contact had a low probability of successful extraction. Adding, my capabilities increased that probability significantly. The decision was tactical. Just tactical? Shaw asked quietly. Reyes looked at him. Primarily tactical, but not entirely. No, Lieutenant, not entirely. She didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. The message was clear. Tactics had dictated her return, but something else, something human had driven her to execute those tactics despite her injuries. The team stood there together, in a hallway in Bagram Medical Center, wrapped in bandages and wearing exhaustion like a second skin. But they were together. And they were alive. Get some rest, Reyes finally said. Debriefs start in 18 hours. I expect everyone mission capable. Yes, ma'am, came the chorus of responses. Reyes turned to leave, then paused. Without looking back, she said, good work today, all of you. Then she walked away, her stride careful but steady, heading toward her own required 72 hours of rest that she'd probably cut to 48 because that's who she was. Shaw watched her go. She's something else, Martinez said quietly. Yeah, Shaw agreed, something else entirely. Cole shifted on his crutches. Think she'll ever actually take time off? Not a chance, Pierce answered. Legends don't rest, they just reload. Warren laughed. You think the story will spread? About the captain coming back from the dead? It'll spread, Shaw said. Trust me. By next week, every SEAL on base will know about it. By next month, it'll be Naval Special Warfare legend. Think they'll get it right? Martinez asked. Shaw shook his head. No, they'll make it bigger, more dramatic, add details that didn't happen. Should we correct them? No. Let the legend grow. Reyes won't care either way. She's too busy planning the next operation to worry about her reputation. And that was true. Tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, Captain Elena Reyes would be back in the field, leading another team, taking another impossible mission, walking into danger first because that's what she did. Because someone had to go first. And Elena Reyes had decided it should be her. The team dispersed slowly, heading to their assigned recovery rooms. Shaw remained in the hallway for a while longer, thinking about the last 48 hours. He'd learned more about leadership in that time than he'd learned in 4 years of formal training. Not from Reyes's lectures or instructions, from watching her actions, the way she'd maintained composure when everything was falling apart, the way she'd calculated odds and made decisions without hesitation, the way she'd refused to accept acceptable losses, and most importantly, the way she'd kept her promise. I bring everyone home, no exceptions. She'd made good on that promise. At tremendous personal cost, but she'd made good. That was the price of being Elena Reyes. Carrying the weight, bearing the injuries, making the impossible choices, and doing it all without complaint, without seeking recognition, without expecting anything except the mission's success. Shaw finally headed to his own recovery room. Behind him, the lights in the hospital hallway hummed quietly. Somewhere in the building, Grant was in recovery. The team was resting. Reyes was probably already reviewing the operation, identifying mistakes, planning improvements. And outside, in the darkness beyond the base, the enemy was regrouping. There would be more missions, more impossible situations, more times when someone would have to go first into danger. And when those times came, Shaw knew exactly who would be leading the way. The legend who didn't die. The captain who always came back. Elena Reyes. 48 hours later, exactly as she'd predicted, Captain Elena Reyes walked into the debriefing room. Shaw was already there, reviewing his notes. He looked up as she entered. She moved carefully, the ribs were still healing, but her bearing was as precise as ever. Fresh bandages wrapped her head, Her left arm was in a support sling that Shaw suspected she'd tried to refuse. "Captain." He stood. "At ease, Lieutenant." She sat down across from him, arranging her materials with one hand. "Grant's status? Upgraded to stable. Doctors say full recovery expected." "Good." She made a note. "And the rest of the team?" "All cleared for light duty. Martinez's shoulder needs another week. Cole's knee is improving faster than expected." "Warren?" "Concussion symptoms are resolving. He's cleared for non-combat operations." Reyes nodded, satisfied. "Then we didn't lose anyone." The way she said it, flat, factual, made it sound routine. But Shaw knew better. He'd seen her face when Grant had gone into surgery, seen the tension in her shoulders until the doctor confirmed survival. She cared. She just didn't show it the way other people did. The door opened. Commander Patricia Hayes entered, accompanied by a Navy investigator Shaw didn't recognize. Everyone stood. Hayes waved them down. "Captain Reyes, Lieutenant Shaw. This is Lieutenant Commander Morrison, JAG office. He has some questions about the operation." Shaw felt his stomach tighten. An investigation. That was never good. Reyes remained perfectly calm. "Of course, Commander." Morrison pulled out a tablet, began reading from notes. "Captain Reyes, I need to clarify the timeline after the ledge collapsed. You fell approximately 70 feet, sustained multiple injuries, and were out of communication with your team for he checked his notes approximately 8 hours. Is that accurate?" "That's accurate. During those 8 hours, you engaged enemy combatants on at least 3 separate occasions, eliminated 16 confirmed hostiles, and traversed 3 kilometers of hostile territory. Alone. While injured." "That's also accurate." Morrison looked up from his tablet. "Captain, standard protocol when an operator is injured and separated from their team is to establish a hide position and wait for extraction or rescue. Can you explain why you chose to deviate from that protocol?" The room went quiet. Reyes met Morrison's eyes without blinking. "The protocol you reference assumes the operator in question is unable to continue the mission. I was injured but functional. My team was engaged with superior enemy forces and required support. Therefore, I provided that support." "You made that assessment alone, without communication with command?" "Yes." "And you decided that your individual contribution was worth the risk of further injury or death?" Shaw saw where this was going. Morrison was building a case not against Reyes necessarily, but documenting a pattern of decisions that deviated from doctrine. Reyes leaned forward slightly, her voice still perfectly controlled. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison, I made a tactical assessment based on the information available. My team was outnumbered, low on ammunition, and attempting to extract a critical casualty through hostile territory. My presence increased their probability of survival from approximately 20% to 75%. That's not arrogance. That's mathematics based on 2 decades of combat experience." Morrison made notes. "And the subsequent engagement at the primary LZ? You initiated an assault on prepared enemy positions with minimal support. I initiated suppressive fire to create an opening for my team to exploit. That's standard small unit tactics. With broken ribs and a concussion, my injuries didn't impact my ability to aim and fire a rifle. The tactics remained sound regardless of my physical condition." Morrison studied her. "Captain, some might say, your actions, while heroic, demonstrated poor judgment regarding your own safety." "Some might say that," Reyes agreed, "but I wasn't trying to be heroic. I was trying to complete the mission and bring my team home. I accomplished both objectives." Commander Hayes spoke up. "Captain Reyes's decisions, while unconventional, resulted in 0 friendly casualties and successful mission completion. That's the metric by which we evaluate operations." Morrison nodded slowly. "Understood, Commander. I'm simply documenting the decision chain for the record." He turned back to Reyes. "One final question, Captain. If you found yourself in a similar situation, again, injured, separated, with the option to wait for rescue, would you make the same choices?" Reyes didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Even knowing the risks?" "Especially knowing the risks. My team needed support. I was capable of providing it. The decision was obvious." Morrison closed his tablet. "Thank you, Captain. That's all I need." He gathered his materials and left. Commander Hayes remained. After the door closed, Hayes looked at Reyes. "Elena, you know what Morrison was really asking, right?" "Yes, ma'am." He was asking if I'm a liability, if my decision-making under stress deviates too far from doctrine to be reliable. And my answer is that doctrine is a guideline, not a cage. I will always make the decision that gives my team the highest probability of survival. If that deviates from doctrine, I'll accept the consequences. Hayes smiled slightly. That's what I thought you'd say. She pulled out a folder. Here's the official after-action report I'll be submitting. You'll note that I've recommended you for a Navy Cross upgrade, Shaw for a Silver Star, and the entire team for Bronze Stars with Valor. Shaw blinked. Ma'am, I don't think. I do think, Lieutenant. What your team accomplished was extraordinary. The commendations are deserved. Reyes spoke quietly. Commander, I prefer my name not be submitted for additional recognition. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Elena, you earned it. Perhaps, but recognition isn't why I did it, and I'd rather the focus remain on the team's performance, not my individual actions. The team's performance was exceptional because of your leadership. The team's performance was exceptional because they're professionals who executed under pressure. That deserves recognition. My choices were simply part of command responsibility. Hayes studied her for a long moment. You're an unusual officer, Captain Reyes. I'm aware, ma'am. All right, I'll leave your name off the individual commendation, but the team citations go forward. Agreed? Agreed. Hayes stood. Good work, both of you. Take the mandatory recovery time seriously. No training operations for 72 hours minimum. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. Hayes left. Shaw looked at Reyes. You really don't want the recognition? I have enough medals, Lieutenant. Another piece of metal doesn't change who I am or how I operate, but it would acknowledge what you did. What I did was my job. Doing your job doesn't require special acknowledgement. Shaw shook his head. Most officers would kill for a Navy Cross. I'm not most officers. We've established that. She stood carefully, gathering her materials with one hand. Shaw stood as well. Captain, can I say something off the record? Reyes looked at him. Go ahead. What you did out there, that wasn't just professional. It was personal. You came back because you care about the team. And that's not a weakness. It's why they'd follow you anywhere. Reyes was quiet for a moment. You're probably right, Lieutenant, but caring and showing that you care are different things. I maintain distance because it allows me to make hard decisions without emotional compromise. The day I can't make those decisions is the day I need to stop leading. And if that day never comes, then I'll keep doing this until I'm physically unable. Which, given my current condition, might be sooner than I'd like. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Broken ribs are inconvenient. How are you really doing, Captain? Honest answer. Reyes considered the question. Honest answer? I'm in significant pain. The concussion is affecting my concentration. I'll need physical therapy for the shoulder. And I'll probably feel this operation in my bones for the next year. But everyone survived, so it was worth it. That simple. That absolute. Shaw nodded. For what it's worth, ma'am, I learned more about command in the last 48 hours than I learned in the previous 4 years. Good. Because eventually, you'll be making these decisions. And when that day comes, you'll understand why I maintain the standards I do. The impossible standards? The necessary standards, Lieutenant. There's a difference. She headed for the door, then paused. Shaw? Yes, ma'am? You did well out there. When you thought I was gone, you kept the team together, made difficult decisions, and adapted to changing circumstances. That's leadership. Coming from Elena Reyes, that might as well have been a medal. Thank you, Captain. She nodded once and left. Shaw stood alone in the debriefing room, processing everything that had happened. In 3 days, this story would spread through naval special warfare. In 3 weeks, it would be legend. In 3 months, new SEAL candidates would hear about Captain Elena Reyes, the commander who fell off a cliff, walked out of a blizzard, and saved her entire team despite injuries that should have killed her. The legend who refused to die. The officer who always came back. And the reality, the human woman behind the legend, carrying pain and responsibility in equal measure, would fade into myth. But Shaw would remember the truth. The way Reyes had moved through that storm, broken but unbroken. The way she'd made impossible calculations seem routine. The way she'd kept her promise. I bring everyone home, no exceptions. That was the legacy of Captain Elena Reyes. Not the medals, not the commendations, not the legends that would be told. The simple, absolute commitment to bringing her people home, no matter the cost. Shaw gathered his materials and headed out. Behind him, the debriefing room stood empty, but the lessons learned there would last a career. 6 months later, Naval Special Warfare Training Facility, Coronado. Instructor Chief Mason Carter stood before a class of SEAL candidates, all of them exhausted from Hell Week, all of them questioning why they were trying to become part of the most elite fighting force in the world. This was the moment Carter loved, the moment when doubt was highest, when physical and mental limits had been reached, when he could remind them why they were here. Today we're going to talk about leadership, Carter began. Specifically, we're going to talk about what real leadership looks like when everything goes wrong. He pulled up an image on the screen. A snowstorm, mountains, hostile terrain. 6 months ago, a SEAL platoon was conducting a personnel recovery operation in the Hindu Kush. The mission went sideways, weather turned, enemy forces were better prepared than intel suggested. And then the platoon commander, Captain Elena Reyes, fell 70 feet off a cliff during an enemy ambush. The candidates were paying attention now. This was the stuff of SEAL legend. Her team thought she was dead. No communication, no visual, blood on the rocks. They prepared to extract without her. Carter paused. What would you do in that situation? A candidate raised his hand. Follow chain of command. The executive officer takes over, complete the mission. Good answer. That's exactly what Lieutenant Shaw did. He took command, made the hard call, and started moving his team toward extraction. Carter advanced the slide. But here's where it gets interesting. New image. A distant figure in the snow, rifle across shoulders. Captain Reyes wasn't dead. She was injured, broken ribs, concussion, dislocated shoulder. She was alone, behind enemy lines, with no radio. Standard protocol says establish a hide and wait for rescue. Carter looked at his class. Captain Reyes didn't follow standard protocol. She assessed the tactical situation, determined her team needed support, and walked 3 kilometers through a blizzard to provide that support. Silence in the classroom. Over the next 8 hours, she eliminated 16 enemy combatants, guided her team to extraction, survived a helicopter crash, and held off another 30 hostiles until air support arrived, all while maintaining command and ensuring 0 friendly casualties. A candidate spoke up. Chief, is that story real? Carter smiled. I've read the after-action reports. I've talked to the operators who were there. Every word is real. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who becomes Captain Elena Reyes. The kind of leader who refuses to accept failure, who keeps promises even when keeping them seems impossible. Carter advanced to the next slide. But here's the lesson I want you to take from this. The new slide showed a simple equation. Leadership equals competence plus commitment plus sacrifice. Reyes had the competence. 20 years of training and combat experience. She knew how to read terrain, how to shoot, how to survive. She had the commitment. When she took command of that platoon, she made a promise. Everyone comes home. She kept that promise. But it was the sacrifice that mattered most. She could have waited for rescue, could have prioritized her own safety. Instead, she prioritized her team, and she paid for that choice with broken ribs, a concussion, and months of recovery. Carter looked at his exhausted class. That's what we're asking of you. Not just physical endurance, not just tactical skill. We're asking if you're willing to sacrifice yourself, your comfort, your safety, your life if necessary for the operator beside you. He paused. Because that's what SEALs do. We go first into the worst situations. We make the hard calls. We bring our people home. Another candidate raised his hand. Chief, do you know Captain Reyes? I've worked with her on 3 deployments. She's one of the finest operators I've ever seen. What's she like? Carter thought about that. Quiet, intense, doesn't waste words, doesn't seek attention, just shows up, does the job, and leaves. He smiled. And she's still out there, still leading teams, still refusing to let anyone get left behind. The class absorbed that. All right, Carter said. Break for chow. Report back in 30 minutes. We're doing land navigation this afternoon. Try to keep up. The candidates filed out. One of them, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, hung back. "Chief, can I ask something?" "Go ahead." Mitchell. "Captain Reyes. Being a female SEAL commander, is that harder?" Carter considered the question carefully. "I'll say this. Captain Reyes doesn't think about being female in the field. She thinks about being competent. And she's earned the respect of every operator who's worked with her, not because of her gender, but despite people focusing on it. She's a SEAL. That's all that matters." Mitchell nodded slowly. "I want to be like her someday. Then focus on competence, commitment, and sacrifice. The rest takes care of itself." Mitchell left. Carter stood alone in the classroom, looking at the image of the snowstorm still on the screen. He'd simplified the story for the candidates, had left out some of the darker details, the moments when Shaw's team truly thought they'd die, the point when Grant's heart had nearly stopped on the operating table, the weeks of nightmares Warren still had about the cold. And he'd definitely left out the part where Reyes, 3 weeks after the operation, had quietly told Carter over coffee that she'd nearly quit. Not during the mission, after. When the adrenaline wore off and the pain set in, and she'd realized how close she'd come to breaking her promise, how close she'd come to losing operators under her command. "I made mistakes," she'd said quietly. "Should have anticipated the rigged ledge, should have positioned the team differently, should have—" "Elena, you brought everyone home this time. But what about next time? What if next time I'm not lucky?" It wasn't luck. It was skill. It was both. And I can't control luck. That conversation had stayed with Carter. The glimpse behind the legend. The human woman who carried the weight of command and felt every pound. But 3 days later, Reyes had been back in the field, leading another operation, making more impossible decisions, bringing her team home. Because that's what she did. Carter shut down the presentation, headed to his office. On his desk was a framed photo from that operation. The whole team, taken 2 weeks after their return. Everyone in dress uniforms. Grant in a wheelchair. Warren with fading bruises. Shaw standing tall beside his captain. And Elena Reyes at the center, smaller than everyone else, face neutral, eyes forward. Not smiling, never smiling in official photos, but alive. And that was what mattered. Carter's phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Heard you're using the Hindu Kush-Op in your training lectures. Keep the focus on the team, not on me. They're the story that matters. ERAR. Carter smiled. Of course Reyes had heard. SEAL community was small. Word traveled. He typed back, "Roger that, Captain, but the story wouldn't exist without you." The response came immediately. "The story exists because the team executed. I was just part of that execution." Typical Reyes. Deflecting, refusing recognition,